Hey, you, I was thinking about you. And today I want you to go with me as we confront a lie about leadership. It's true. This is the fact. Leadership requires confidence. But what happens is we sometimes think that confidence equals loud, or that confidence equals like the person who has all the answers, the person that speaks up in the room, the person that seems to always volunteer or that's always up front. But what I've learned after more than 20 years in corporate leadership is that around the table, a lot of times the leader is the most quiet, that the most powerful leaders might not be the one dominating the conversation. And so today, I want you to take this journey because confidence isn't loud. It's about being clear and clarity. Clarity doesn't shout, it doesn't perform, it stands. And today we're talking about what it really means to find your voice as a leader. I'm excited for you to meet our guest for today, Reverend Cheryl Hurley. Reverend Cheryl Hurley is an author, leadership, and mindset coach, and the founder of Empowered to Inspire You LLC, where she helps women find their voice and lead with clarity and conviction. She is the host of the You Matter podcast and the author of the upcoming book, Leadership Unwrapped, which explores how clarity, conviction, and authenticity help shape leader influence. Join us for today's conversation. Without further ado, I would love to introduce to you Reverend Cheryl Hurley, today's special guest. Welcome, Coach Cheryl Hurley. It is great to have you today on the show.
Oh, it is so great to be here, Katina. I have been so looking forward to this conversation. And again, I just so salute you and all that you're doing to impact lives that women could walk in who they're supposed to be. So I'm glad to be here. So glad to be here.
Oh, and we are so glad to have you. I already teed up who you are, and actually, to our listeners, you can read more about Reverend Cheryl in the notes, in the show notes. Today, we are unpacking a lot. I already told you that there's a lie that confidence is loud.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to ask you right off the bat to just expound upon confidence not being loud, or leadership not being loud.
Well, leadership is not loud. And, as I think about some of the conversations that we've had, and we think about how leadership is developed, sometimes people think that in order to be an effective leader, you have to be a loud leader. And through my
Mhm.
experience working and starting off in corporate, I saw a lot of that. And what I came to learn is that leadership is not loud. Effective leadership can be very quiet, very much so.
So effective leadership can be quiet. So when we talk about leadership,
Mm-hmm.
would you say that there's a persona that people have, or an image of what leadership and good leadership might look like?
Absolutely. Many, when we think about it, many individuals, particularly when we think about women, women struggle with this because somewhere along the journey, we were taught that
Mm.
sometimes directly and sometimes indirectly to shrink, to question ourselves, or to wait for permission before speaking. And over time, that can cause us to second guess the very wisdom that life has already given us in terms of who we are in that existing or that becoming or that rising, a rising leader. So, but what I've learned, however, is that leadership isn't about sounding like everyone else. It's about sounding confidently in who you are and sharing the truth that this has been formed through your experiences. And sometimes we dismiss the things that we've experienced. So if we don't show up a certain way, we feel like, well, I'm not the effective leader that I need to be.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
That's so true. So a lot of times,
Hmm.
and I've seen this in the with the leaders that I've worked with, and
Hmm.
they didn't always start out as leaders. So they've seen something, they've emulated it, they've kind of impersonated what they thought was good leadership,
Hmm.
and they're not, and as we spoke even before the show, they're
Mhm.
not showing up authentically. So um when you talk about showing up authentically, that is confident. If I can show up authentically as myself, I can be confident in who I am because I've made peace with who I am. I know my values, I know where I stand. But when I'm emulating what I think others need to be, it's like I'm playing a role. So I'm not showing up authentically. And I love how in the work that you do,
Mhm.
you are helping leaders, especially women, find their voice.
Yeah.
When you say that, what does that mean?
What that means, Katina, is that oftentimes there's something that I call the comparison syndrome, where
Mm,
there are individuals that will look at other people and they will try to mimic that behavior or that leadership style, thinking that's the way they should show up. And one of the things that I'm a firm believer in is that we all have our own spiritual gifting, our own spiritual shaping. And
mhm,
if we don't operate from the core of who we are, then we're going to show up as, for lack of better words, fake or pretentious, and it does not allow us to own our voice because we're operating outside of the spirit of who we are versus within who we actually are, like our identity. This is who I am, this is who you are, and I lead from that versus leading from what people expect of me. And when we do that, it kind of conflicts with us being able to show up as being vulnerable, daring to be authentic. And when I think about vulnerability, you could see my strengths. I could see your strengths. But
mm.
what about allowing people to see my weaknesses, to see my flaws, and still consider me as a leader? Yeah.
So we have to unpack that. So you're saying that even being vulnerable
Hmm.
in certain spaces help with my leadership or help with my confidence
Yeah.
in my leadership. What does that look like?
What that looks like is that when we talk about being vulnerable and
Mhm.
not only showing the strengths but showing the weaknesses, what happens is that every time we're walking, we're modeling. And what happens is that somebody could be an aspiring leader. Well, if they're struggling in a particular area in their leadership style or their leadership skills, or whether or not they're questioning, am I or can I be an effective leader? When I dare to show up vulnerable, when I dare to show up and say, hey, I made a mistake, or, I miscalculated in something, and they see that, it takes away or dismisses that saga that you have to be perfect, that you have to make sure that you make no mistakes, that you're just cookie cutter crisp. And when people see that, they say, oh, wow, well, there's a possibility for me that I can show up, I can lead, and I can lead from a place of transparency.
There is such a lack of transparency in the dysfunctional groups that I get to work with. I get the pleasure to work with and help unravel. It's and you've hit on a key that that vulnerability translates to transparency. And then I'll go back to what you said when they'll mimic someone that they believe is a strong leader. A lot of times in their minds, they're they're thinking I've got to have all the right answers. Confidence is I am confident that I have all the right answers, and because it's tough to always have the right answers, it would be tough to then show up confidently. It's tough. You can't go in scared and confident at the same time.
Oh,
Scared that I don't have all the right answers. And why do you think so many women struggle with this?
it's because of their experiences and what they've seen. And some
Mm,
people have seen that type of leadership and they think that's the way I'm supposed to be. But what happens is that when you try to adopt a personality or a character or an identity that's not who you are, it is going to interfere with your ability to be transparent and basically to be naked and not ashamed, to show up as you are. And when I think about, the fact of how some individuals attempt to lead, what happens is that they don't even understand that the person they might be mimicking might also be struggling with an inability to dare to be vulnerable because of fear of something that they've experienced in their life,
oh,
something they've experienced, some narrative that they've told themselves that's actually dictating how they lead, what they do, and what they don't do, versus just daring to be authentic. Dare to say, I don't have all the answers. And one of the things that, as I listened to what you were sharing a few moments ago, it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out and get back to you. Some people think that's a weakness because they don't have it in the moment. I'm
Mhm.
like, it's okay to say, I don't have the answer, but I can find out for you and get back to you.
Because part of, you know, if I could just piggyback on that, part of leadership
Mhm.
is also how well you interpret instruction, how well you break it down for the team, how well you cast the vision, how well you help motivate them. We get stuck on the one part that I don't know that answer. Someone else in the room can know the answer, but can they lead the people to get the project done? Can they cast the vision? Can they assign and align the table with the differing talents in the room to get it done? Leadership is so much more than having the right answer.
Oh, it is. It is. You know, Katina, when I think about what you just said, I think about we say dream work makes the team work. But when we think about that and we look at the team, see, now you went there. When you talk about the team, every single person on the team, it reminds me of the book about the hedgehog concept. Like
Mm,
everybody needs to know their seat on the bus. And if you don't know your seat on the bus because you're looking at somebody else's seat and thinking my seat is supposed to look like that, or I'm supposed to do that, and then what happens? Chaos erupts. But when you dare to have those quiet moments with yourself, when we talk about the loud leadership versus a quiet leadership, quiet means I have to do some introspective
mhm,
reflection of who I am, what I bring to the table, and what it is that I know that I'm supposed to be operating or I'm supposed to be doing. When we don't take time to do that, we
mhm,
sometimes can find ourselves in a position or a posture that we're being who somebody wants us to be, or we're doing what somebody wants us to do, versus walking in authenticity about this is what I'm passionate about. This
mm,
is where I flow. This and when you think about hedgehog concept, every single person on the bus knew what their seat was and they
mhm,
sat in it. And because the team complements one another, that's how the projects get accomplished versus one man show. You got a team, but you're charged with everything. Somewhere along
mhm.
the line, when we think about team, relationship building plays a part in that. That means I got to take time out to get to know who you are, and you have to take time to get to know who I am.
And back to what you said, if I am not showing up as authentically who I really am, who I'm purposed to be,
Yeah.
then how can I let you get to know me?
Mm,
And how do I interact with who I've gotten to know you to be if I am coming from a place that is disingenuous to what I really am?
absolutely. Because it goes back to that narrative. What's
Mhm,
the story that we've been telling ourselves about ourselves? And oftentimes it's based upon an experience. You're going to have an experience and you're going to make some interpretation or impression about that experience that
mhm,
becomes a part of your story or your narrative, as you will. And that kind of controls what you do, how you show up. So if I had a negative experience or an unhealthy experience, then my mindset might say, well, I need to make sure I'm polished and I show up a certain way and I do X, Y, and Z this
mhm,
way instead of unpacking, well, what was the feelings associated or the emotions associated with what you experienced that caused you to feel a certain way, that you can kind of re revisit the story, give the
mm.
story a new meaning for what it is, take the learning lessons from that experience and let that be what governs you. Because what I will say, some of my earlier leadership experiences, they were not healthy.
Unpack that. What does unhealthy look like? What does a survivor of an unhealthy look like?
I actually had one of my earlier work experiences. I worked
Mhm,
underneath a leader that was absolutely toxic. And what happens, I was a direct reportee. So what happened was that that was my CEO. This person gave me orders, and my responsibility was to execute. And
mhm,
when I talk about toxic, you have to be, when we talk about dream teams, they have to be people who have established relationships. There's a collaboration there where we value each other and we value what a person brings to the team.
mhm,
Well, this particular leadership did not value that. So it was always the very narcissistic, the very controlling, very domineering, more dictatorial. It was all of that. And you felt like you didn't have a voice, and it was loud. So what happened was, like, while I was one of the reportees, because of my personality, I had a way of working around it. While it was not always comfortable, I had a way of working around and navigating, and I would always also be the buffer for the other persons who were just having a hard time. But that experience, which
Mhm.
I appreciate, it taught me, and it was one of my very first lessons of the type of leader I did not want to be. See,
Mm.
what happens is I could look at it and say, well, that person was horrific, horrible, the whole 9 yards, and like I didn't like that person. But we had over time developed one of the best working relationships. Don't ask me how. We did. But what I learned from this individual, while they were strong and gifted in their ability and their skill set, they didn't have relational skills. And one of the things that's important when you talk about people walking in authenticity and walking and daring to be vulnerable, we got to the point that we could have those conversations, because she got to the place where she would say, why is it that I seem to have a hard time with everybody except for you? And it opened a door for me to share the why. But it
Mm.
started out that way. And when I tell you, when I say toxic, I can't even begin to tell you how many times I was ready to throw in the towel and say, I'm out. But what happens is I was like, no, you need to stay in here because you're going to learn something from this. So what I
Mhm.
learned was the leader that I did not want to be. So what I experienced, I kind of turned it around, because at the end of the day, I don't care what your position is. When you're leading people, you lead people from a place of respect, a place of integrity, and a place that they feel that they matter and that they feel that they're good enough. And when you are constantly domineering and telling people what to do, you don't give them the opportunity to use the mindset that they have, one, and to own their voice, because they're always being told what to do. And that's not healthy leadership to me.
I love that. I love acknowledging that.
Hmm.
I My experience was in pharmaceutical industry, and in the earlier part of leadership, and still today there are fewer people that look like me, fewer women in leadership, especially fewer African American um, and other brown women in leadership. And so there was a leadership type, and I remember going to the national meetings, and everybody would have on, if the leader was like a suit and tie guy, then everybody had a similar kind of suit, or the plaid blazer and the khakis, or whatever the trend was, and how they led the meetings, the speech, the everything was cookie cutter,
Hmm.
and everyone was striving to be like the leader. And so you had a perpetuated type or style or culture. You said narcissistic type, the kind of domineering, loud, and people that were waiting to be promoted were looking at that and emulating that so they could squeeze through that lens. And now there's been pushback in the industry, and people are starting to find their voice, but it is important that you are confident
Hmm.
in what your values are, because if you get in a place that you earned by emulating someone else's style or being just like them, you are going to perpetuate the same kind of system, the same kind of culture, and the same kind of fear that you had.
Hmm.
You'll perpetuate that in the potential leaders that will be now under you or reporting to you. And I know that your lived experience
Hmm.
has led you to the next book that you're writing, about. Tell us about what's being unwrapped or unveiled. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. The new book that's coming forth, and it's actually Leadership Unwrapped. It was inspired by the realization that leadership, when we really think about it, is often talked about in theory, but is truly shaped through real life experiences. And when I think about the experiences that I encountered through my journey, I've had the experience, the opportunity to witness and experience different types of leadership environments. Some were healthy, as I shared, and some
Mhm.
were unhealthy, and others that were very challenging. And when I think about every single one of those moments taught me something about what leadership should look like and what it should never become. And what I wanted, what I desired for this book is to do is to create a space where leadership could be discussed honestly and authentically. Leadership isn't always polished, as some will believe that it is. It is not. Sometimes it is formed in moments of reflection, when we
Mm.
moments and we consider growth and the
Mhm.
growth steps that are necessary, and even in discomfort, because we all know that growth often takes place not in a comfort zone, but in
Mhm.
the uncomfortable places. And my hope is that as readers dive into the book, they will see themselves in the stories and recognize that their leadership journey is still unfolding. And the goal is not about perfection, as many believe that it is. It's about growth, it's about awareness, and it's about purposeful or intentional influence.
Oh, I want to ask those of you who are watching, if you happen to be listening and not watching, one, if you're driving, do not take your hand off the steering wheel. But I want you to, if you're watching, type in the comments if you've ever been in a situation and circumstance that you found yourself mimicking
Mm,
or emulating leadership that in hindsight was not a healthy copy, was not um, a healthy aspiration. If it's you, go ahead and type that in the comments. And we want to talk about that pivot. Like,
hmm
what happens to someone that is sitting there with all of what's in them, and they're tired of being overlooked. They're tired of, and they realize, well, wait, I kind of been overlooked. I've not been elevated, and I have more in. What happens when somebody has had enough?
When you get to the point that you recognize that you've had enough, the
Mhm.
first thing is going to require you to quiet yourself and begin to have a real conversation with who you are and
Mhm.
what it is that you desire.
Mhm.
Because again, shaping is everything. And you can only be who you were called to be. And we
Mhm.
try to be a copycat of somebody else. There's just going to be some residual that's going to cause us to flow in a place of unrest. But when you get sick and tired, you're going to do something different. Because you do the same thing, you get the same results. And one of the things is that when you take time out to begin to check in with yourself and see what it is that you want. And once you've identified that, begin to move in that direction. You move from a place of being stuck to a place of, or even being stagnated, to a place of movement. And in that movement, you look around and see what are the supports, because that's the other thing when we talk about being vulnerable, willing to say that I've been over here for too long and I've been doing this, but this is not who I am and this is not what I want to do. I know what I want to do, but I need some guidance. I need
Mm.
somebody to come along and support me in what it is I want to do and not be ashamed to ask for help. Because one of the other things about leadership is okay to ask for help. That's where coaching, the mentoring, the support comes in. And I'm grateful for the supports that I had, because once I got to the place that I was willing to acknowledge where I had been, where I
Mhm.
wanted to go, guess what? As they say, when the student is ready, the teacher shows up. The
Oh, I
teachers
love that.
in my life showed up. And the thing about it, it's amazing that people that are observing you, they already know to some extent who you are, but they're
Mhm.
waiting for you to come into the realization of who you are.
Absolutely. So, I there are a couple of tells
Mm-hmm.
that you might have, and I'm wondering if we can give some tells to the audience. Like maybe you're there and you're in an organization or a group or a situation circumstance where the leader is toxic, the environment is toxic, whatever, but you find yourself being a go-to, like people come to you with questions, or people, you find yourself rallying the troops.
Mm,
A tell that you've got some leadership in you that you didn't know you had is when certain other leadership characteristics start to ooze out. This is, go with me, listen to me, hear me, what I am saying, that there are leadership characteristics that you're missing
Mm.
because you're mimicking what you hear because you think that that leader is the leader because they're confident and you think that their confidence is loud and that's what you're mimicking. But I want us to, and Reverend Cheryl, if you will go with me, let's throw out a couple of examples of leadership characteristics that people, you listening, might be exhibiting that you didn't know indicates that there's something more that's tied to your authenticity.
Mm. A person who's has vision, a visionary. A person that's a visionary, they could see beyond the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that if you're under toxic leadership that's constantly telling you what it is that you should do versus what your perspective is and what you bring to the table,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you can find yourself shrinking underneath that instead of rising to shine and be an attribute to the team
Yes.
versus being a yes man or yes woman.
And you might feel like
Yeah.
you're a little rebellious
Hmm.
or that you feel like you're the problem child because now you're asking why are we doing it, and that's because it's feeding something that's innate in you. You need to see the vision, and then are you the one that once you know why you're doing it, you help your team jump on board because you're able to explain that?
Exactly, exactly. And that's so important because, you know, I think about a colleague that I worked with previously. We worked on several projects together. And what we had to do was like, we take that hedgehog concept to heart. And
Mm,
we had to recognize because we didn't want to be bumping heads because some of our gifting or shaping, as you will, was similar,
mhm.
which is one of the reasons why we meshed. But at the same time, we have to be mindful that it didn't cause conflict in what we were trying to accomplish, but willing to have those hard, courageous conversations where
Mhm.
we talked about that. And see, another thing when I think about what we're talking about is communication. Communication is everything. See, we don't need people interpreting or assuming. We need to be clear communication so that it
Clarity.
leads us to understanding and the clarity that we need. When
Mhm,
there is no communication, there is no clarity. And
mhm,
oftentimes, I hate to say it, but we sometimes are flowing off assumptions.
mhm.
And it's so unfair because your assumption is just that, an assumption. And until you have a conversation and get the clarity, it's no more than that. But decisions oftentimes are made off of assumptions
So,
versus
so, so is that you? Listen to that. Are
Mhm.
you the one that is constantly seeking clarity?
Mhm.
And then you're able to restate maybe some muddy, murky instructions or guidance and
Mhm.
help the team identify and really sink their teeth or wrap their head around what's being asked. You've brought clarity.
Mhm.
You're asking the questions. You're having the hard conversations. That is a leadership skill. You
Yes.
have strong communication. You were able to bring people around the table and give clarity. When there is clarity, now there's momentum. Now there's the ability to
Yes.
have a different level of discussion. Do you know that without that, the team doesn't function as well? This is, if you're looking for a sign that you've got leadership in you that you might not know, this is that. We already talked about clarity and communication and vision. Those are three uh, traits or characteristics you might be walking around with, not confident in your ability, and your team, your organization needs what you're sitting quietly on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is so, so, so important. And the thing about it is that because we recognize that as women, we can be emotional.
Mm,
And we have to make sure that we keep our emotional intelligence intact,
mhm,
that we don't give attention to the wrong thing, but we
mm,
give attention to the right thing. And what you talked about, knowing who you are and knowing your identity allows you to be in the room,
mhm.
sitting at the table and giving it listening. And that's why leadership is quiet and not loud, because the quiet person is hearing everything that's taking place in the room. And I could tell you, Katina, I used to show up in the room and I would be the quiet person. And I
Mhm,
remember one of my colleagues that I work with, somebody made a comment that we were meeting with, and they
mhm,
said that she, you know, some of you are very, very, very talkative, but she's quiet. And the person said, I can tell you that there's not one thing in this room that she would miss in this conversation. And it's the truth because
Mhm.
listening is so key. Not only is listening key for coaching, listening is key when you're sitting in a room with decision makers because something you have an objective in terms of what you want the outcome to be.
Right.
Somebody has to be the ear. When you think about, see, I'm going back to your hand. You have all these, somebody has to be the ear in the room to
Mhm.
hear to help move it forward. But if you don't have a listener in the ear and they know, because somebody might say, listening is not a leadership skill. Who said that? It's a very important leadership skill because you're going to hear what's said and you're going to hear what's not said.
Mhm.
You're just going to hear that. But again, when we don't know who we are, and we
Mhm.
don't know what we possess as up and coming leaders or in
Mhm.
the process of our becoming, we take on the characteristic of what somebody else said we were or who we were and what we're supposed to do
Mhm.
versus that passion. And a lot of times I've found, Katina, I've asked people, what are you most passionate about? Can I tell you that so many people say, I don't know.
So when you don't know what you're passionate about, it is time for you to expand where you are.
Mm-hmm,
Get somewhere and get inspired.
mm-hmm,
Get back to the core work. So someone says to you, I don't know what I'm passionate about. What do you do to get them from that to a place of passion?
the first thing I'm going to tell you to do when you tell me you don't know what your passion is, because I believe and I know that you do, that every person has a purpose. And
Mhm.
that first purpose is often linked to your passion. I'm
Mhm.
going to challenge you to take some quiet time. I want you to put a pause on it, the pen. I want you to be quiet and take some time to set and just be quiet. And I want you to throw that question out into the atmosphere. What is my passion? And I
Mm.
just want you to sit with that. And then what comes up for you that's built upon that. Because most times people somewhere along the line, they've gotten distracted and they've got caught up in something that took them away from what their passion was.
Mhm.
And then, or some people have just been so busy that they've never taken the time out to explore, what am I most passionate about? And one
Mhm.
of the things is like when we converse again, I'm going to tell, it's that thing that you can close your, you go to sleep with it, you wake up with it,
Mhm.
it's in the recesses of your mind, but you might be telling the story to yourself that this is never going to come into fruition, this is never going to happen, and that's your passion. That thing that you can do without even being compensated for it. Like that's your passion. That thing that comes so easily for you,
Mhm.
so natural for you. But again, because we can get caught up in someone else's expectation of us because we're looking for acceptance. We want to be
Mhm.
a part of all those other things versus when you stop to think about it, does it bring you joy? Does
Does
it
it
bring
bring you
you
joy?
does it bring you joy? When
Mhm.
I tell you my passion is to make sure every single woman, and if a man comes in the midst, that they know that they matter, I am
Mhm.
passionate about that. And it shows up in whatever I'm doing. I need you to know that. And what happens is sometimes people link their passion with a job or a
Mm.
it's your passion that's going to show up in the job.
Right.
Whatever your assignment. If I'm preaching, teaching, counseling, coaching, whatever I'm doing, you matter is coming up because that's I'm passionate about that. And it you have to take time just to stop and pause. And sometimes you just got to put a pin in everything else and say, I just need to be quiet for a moment. And those sabbaticals that sometimes we have to take,
Yes.
get to that place because we are a very busy people.
Yes.
We are
So
very busy people.
you're talking about you matter.
Yes.
And all of our discussion has been about the lie that confidence is loud.
Mhm.
And so we might be talking to some people that are silent, not just not loud, but they're silent and they've been silenced. And we've already said, we've given you a couple of tells that in your silence, one, there is a passion, there's something that you would do all day for free. It's aligned to your purpose. That's something to explore. Two, are you visionary? Three, are you communicative? Are you able to communicate and help even interpret for others
Mhm.
and bring for clarity? All four of those
Mhm.
are silent. We haven't said anything out loud yet. And already that builds confidence. We are talking about you being a leader, but not really stepping into the confidence
Mm,
of that because it doesn't look like maybe what you see.
mm,
Again, if you needed signs that there's leadership in you, if we can help you dispel the myth that confidence isn't loud, leader is not necessarily synonymous even with what you see, and that I'm going to add this, you won't be a great leader for long by being someone else, by mimicking what you see, even if it's a great leader that you mimic. Sometimes we mimic great leaders, but we miss out on our version of that great leader. If you were inspired by someone,
mhm.
it's important for you to know how they behave, how they act, what their core values are. How does that align or disalign with mine? So I'm
Right.
asking you, who are you emulating? Who are you mimicking? Who do you admire that you can take pieces of
Mhm.
and be vulnerable
Yeah.
and self aware enough
Yeah.
to discard pieces that don't fit and align with
Yeah.
who you're created to be?
Yeah. Katina, thinking about that question, individuals, the first thing that came to mind for me was for individuals to examine, who are you looking at? Ooh, that's because even if I think about my own narrative and my own journey, I'm mindful of who I was looking at. And when I talked about that earlier relationship that was unhealthy in leadership, I saw that person, but I got an opportunity to see what I didn't want to become as a leader. But I also recall those leaders that had those attributes or those
Mhm.
characteristics that I admired. And it
Mm.
wasn't that I wanted to be like them, but there was a character trait that I saw that I just admired. And when I think about there have been several people that have made an imprint on my life,
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
leadership style. And what happens is one of them is you have to be bold and courageous, but
Mm.
gentle with it. You don't have to be hard. You don't have to be loud.
So
And when
bold and courageous isn't necessarily loud.
Exactly. No, no, it's not. No, it's not. Because bold is also, and there's certain words that we use, and if we take time to unpack them, we will
Mhm.
understand while they might sound strong or sound negative, oh, they have some very powerful attributes to them in the
Mhm.
process of our becoming. And I was one of that person, one of those people that I was quiet. When you talk about the people that don't speak, they're silent. I
Mhm.
was a silent person.
Mm.
But guess what I had to see? I had to see a bold and a courageous person, but
Mhm.
operating in a spirit of maturity, not
Mhm.
control, not dictatorial, but they stood firmly in who they believed, their identity. It was bold and it was courageous. And I was like, oh, okay. I could go a whole nother place with that scripturally, but I admired that. But not only that, looking at individuals that are consistent.
Mm.
That's elite
Consistent.
consistency, because we could be here, there, and everywhere. No, they were on one thing. And I had a mentor who taught me that we can do three things well, but we can't do 50 million things well. He said, because something is going to fall through the cracks. So
And
when
so
we think about
that's a challenge, though.
that's a
That's a
challenge.
challenge because
Yeah.
many of us,
Hmm.
circumstances necessitate that we carry way too much. You mentioned sabbatical. You mentioned doing things well.
Right.
A
Hmm.
lot of times we just maintain. How do you ever grow? You also mentioned growth mindset and being in a place to grow. All of those things align to you being honest with yourself about what your strengths are, and you're going to have to prioritize.
That's it.
You're going to have to prioritize. And within that priority, you've got to be
Mhm.
in the top. You've got to be. Why? Because if I'm carrying way too many things, I'm burning out
Yes.
and I'm not being my best self. I'm on autopilot. I'm not growing. I'm just maintaining. And leadership, while leadership isn't loud, it also isn't stagnation. And you cannot grow and be stagnant at the same time. And you cannot grow in all things at all times.
That's
It
right.
is important to take that mature step and cut some things down.
You really do. You really do. And not only that, it's like in the pause, understanding the power of the pause and say, okay, let me just regroup. Let me refocus. Let me look. And you use the word prioritize. You have to prioritize. And then if you have something like you look at, maybe there are three important things that you need to work on at the same time, but
Mhm.
there needs to be a connection within those three things, that you're not helter skelter, over here, over here. Like everything has to be in alignment. And when
Mhm.
there's not alignment, you find yourself all over the place. And one of the things as leaders, we cannot afford to be burnt out, because
Mm.
we're going to transfer that in whatever it is that we're doing. And what happens when we think about making people feel that they value and making people feel that they matter, if I'm burnt out and I'm operating from that place, I'm going to bleed on somebody,
Mm.
intentionally or unintentionally. I'm
Mhm.
going to wound somebody because of my weariness, because my irritation, or whatever the case might be. And we have to recognize pause moments are there for a purpose. Just as it said, pause. Sometimes you just need to put a pin in it and say, I need to rest. And that
Mm.
rest, if it means 7 days, if it
Mhm.
means 30 days, if it means 3 months, whatever that time is, you need to take that time for yourself. I think about Katina, back in 2017,
Mm.
I took ill, and I literally was on bed rest for 4 months, and I didn't like it at all. I
Mm.
didn't like it. But in those 4 months was the beginning stages of me really coming to appreciate what a pause looks like.
Mm.
See, we don't want to be put in a position of pause because out of necessity, but
Mhm.
recognizing that we need to do it for based upon a health condition. But basically, our emotions, our thoughts, our behavior, there are things about us that you need to take a pause.
Mhm.
Listen to that inner voice and
Oh.
do what's necessary that you can be who you're supposed to be, operating the way you're supposed to operate. But
Mm.
we don't want to be the burnout leaders. We really don't.
You cannot show up confidently
Nope.
and burnt out.
Nope. Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
You're constantly nervous
Yeah.
about who will expose you. And I work as a an imposter syndrome
Mm.
coach. And that also leads to imposter syndrome because there's a lack of confidence with everything that the people are carrying. So I see them and I'm saying, well, you're doing 500 things. You're not confident because you haven't sat with any of those enough time to walk in your confidence. And you're just waiting for the shoe to drop. You're waiting to be exposed. You're waiting. But today, we're talking about being the confident leader,
Yeah.
that there is something in you that may not look like what you see,
Yeah.
but it is time for you to come out of your shell.
Mm.
It is time for you to, as you said, to go back to the narrative, the
Mhm.
story you've been telling yourself,
Yeah. Mhm.
and identify who you are, what aligns with who you were created to be, and begin to move toward that.
Yeah. It is so important. It is so, so important for your mental health, for
Mhm.
your emotional health,
Mm.
for your spiritual health, and for your everyday social health, that leads you and causes you to become the leader that you desire to be, and walking in that leadership style. Because if you don't have all of those things just where they need to be at,
Mhm.
balanced and aligned, you're not going to show up as the leader that you're supposed to be. I'm not going to say the leader that you're striving to, the leader that you're supposed to be. And that leadership is connected to your shaping, to your personal design of who you are, your
Mm.
identity. And when you hear moments like the resting, I can't stress enough, because we have a lot of conversation around self-care.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, what does self-care really look like for you?
Mm.
It goes beyond just our getting our hair done, getting our
Mm.
fingernails done, and all those kinds of.
Mhm, mhm,
Self-care is how do we sit ourselves down and take those meaningful rest moments for ourselves that we can process the things that we have going on. Many times, Katina, we wake up with an agenda. We have a whole laundry list of what we're going to do for the day.
mhm,
Say from a place of arrival, but I've learned the importance of starting my day off with my own personal quiet time with my
mhm,
and say, what is it that you want me to focus on today?
mhm,
And I could tell you, I'm at a place that most nights when I lie down, lie down in a place of peacefulness because what I was supposed to do that day, I did. And I have the confidence because we're talking
mhm,
about confidence. If I didn't get it done today, it'll get done the next day. But I'm not at a place where I'm burning the candles on both ends because I've done that.
mhm.
And that impedes upon your ability to have or practice a level of self-care that you need to practice. We talk about the self-care of our emotions. I shared with you last week I had 2 funerals in 1 week.
Mm.
Dear people to me, the leadership in me said, Cheryl, you need to pause.
Mhm,
On Friday evening, we had a ministry event. On Saturday, it was a quiet day just for me
mhm,
to regroup and get my emotions intact. And I didn't have a busy schedule. I intentionally had to set it up that way because otherwise I might have bled on somebody. My emotions
mm,
were just like, when knowing ourselves, being true to ourselves, and having those pause moments
mhm.
that we can just kind of see where we are is key. It's key.
That's so good. That
It's
is so powerful.
it's key.
That is so powerful. As we prepare to move forward, I'm hoping that so far you've gotten some nuggets. In fact, type in the comment section what nuggets you've already gleaned and things you might walk away with and do differently. One thing you might walk away with and do differently based on this conversation. And Cheryl, I would love for you to leave us with some final thoughts, some final nuggets that I
Mhm.
definitely want to make sure the audience benefits from.
Awesome, awesome. Katina, and to our viewers and our listeners, in this season, this is such a necessary conversation that we've had. But in this season, leadership for me is about helping individuals recognize their value and the power of their voice. And my focus is on encouraging others to lead authentically and embrace the lessons from their journey. And that's the heart behind, again, Leadership Unwrapped. And if I could leave you with 3 nuggets, wisdom nuggets, as you will, the first nugget that I want to leave with you is that leadership, it is not about having the loudest voice in the room. It's about having the clarity and conviction to use the voice you've been given for the purpose that you've been assigned it for. And that's the first one. Now, the second nugget is many of the experiences that you might have wished that you could have skipped are the very moments that shape the leader that you're eventually becoming in the process of it all. And the third wisdom nugget is the moment that you, my sister and my brother, begin to believe that your voice matters, it is the moment that your leadership truly, truly begins. Remember, you operate from the core of who you are and not from who people expect you to be. And when we think about it, leadership is often unwrapped through experience. The question that I have for you that I want to leave with you is not whether you will have those moments, but what will you learn from them?
So powerful. Thank you so much for those nuggets. And thank you for your time today and for the work that you do. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for living through toxicity and narcissism in order that many more can soar. I am excited to see what comes of these nuggets that flourish in
Yeah.
the lives of our listeners. I'm grateful for our friendship. I'm grateful for you coming on our show today. And I want to just thank you. And for those of you watching, you can check out the information and how to reach out to Reverend Cheryl. And also, we'll keep in touch about the upcoming release of the new book. I hope that you heard what she said. I hope you took it to heart. And I hope that you learned something because today's episode was very, very powerful.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on the show with you, to have this conversation, which was powerful and it was truly rich. And I share in your expectations that the listeners and the viewers will walk away with those nuggets necessary for them to move forward in the direction that they're supposed to walk in their life purpose. But again, thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Hey, you, I was thinking about you. And you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking it's time for you to walk in confidence, because confidence and leadership are not synonymous with loud. What you have on the inside of you, when you embrace that and walk in it, you show up authentically. And when you show up authentically, confidence is felt. So if any of this episode resonated with you, there's information in the show notes on how to reach out to me, because I believe it's your time to soar, to get unstuck. Hey, you, I was thinking about you.